A 25-year follow-up study of 7,959 British adults found that people who consistently slept 6 hours or less per night at age 50 were 30% more likely to develop dementia by their mid-70s compared to those who slept 7 or more hours. The study, published in Nature Communications, is one of the longest-running investigations of sleep and cognitive aging ever conducted. But the number of hours is only part of the story. What aging actually does to sleep, not to duration but to the internal structure of sleep itself, is the finding that researchers consider more mechanistically important. And it has implications for what you can actually do about it. In this video, what the Whitehall 2 cohort study found and how to interpret it, why sleep architecture, the pattern of sleep stages across a night, changes significantly after 55, what the current evidence suggests about the connection between deep sleep and dementia risk, and 3 evidence-based steps for improving sleep quality at this age. Quick note before we go further, this is educational content based on published research, not medical advice. Talk to your physician before making changes to your sleep management, particularly if you are taking any sleep medications or have been diagnosed with a sleep disorder. Now, the study. Before looking at the paper itself, it is worth understanding what sleep does for the aging brain. In 2013, researchers discovered that the brain has its own waste clearance system, now called the glymphatic system, named by analogy to the lymphatic system. During sleep, particularly during the deepest stage, slow-wave sleep or N3 sleep, cerebrospinal fluid pulses through channels surrounding blood vessels in the brain, washing out metabolic waste products. Among those waste products are amyloid beta and tau, the proteins that accumulate in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. The glymphatic system is most active during deep sleep and largely inactive during waking hours. The problem for adults over 55 is that slow-wave sleep declines with age, consistently and measurably. A comprehensive review published in Neuron in 2017 by Mander, Weiner, and Walker documented that slow-wave sleep, which can account for 15 to 20% of total sleep in young adults, often falls below 5% in adults in their 60s and 70s. This shift happens independently of total sleep duration. A person can sleep 8 hours and have severely degraded slow-wave sleep. The consequence, according to this line of research, is reduced glymphatic clearance and greater amyloid accumulation over time. This is the mechanistic bridge between aging sleep and dementia risk. Now for the Sabia et al. Study. The Whitehall 2 cohort is a long-running study of British civil servants that began in 1985. It is one of the most thoroughly characterized longitudinal cohorts in aging research. Participants were recruited in London and followed for decades with repeat health assessments. For the sleep and dementia analysis, the researchers used data from 7,959 participants, tracking sleep duration assessments conducted at ages 50, 60, and 70. Dementia diagnoses were identified through hospital records, mental health registry linkage, and death registry data. The primary exposure variable was sleep duration reported at age 50. Short sleep was defined as 6 hours or fewer per night. The reference group was 7 or more hours. By the end of follow-up, 521 participants had developed dementia, providing the event count needed for robust statistical analysis. The researchers adjusted for an extensive set of potential confounders, including socioeconomic status, physical activity, alcohol use, smoking, BMI, depression history, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The main finding: people sleeping 6 hours or fewer at age 50 had a hazard ratio of 1.3 for incident dementia, a 30% higher risk compared to those sleeping 7 or more hours. The 95% confidence interval was 1.08 to 1.57. That interval does not include 1, so the finding is statistically significant. Crucially, this association remains significant after adjusting for the extensive list of confounders mentioned, including depression, which itself is associated with both poor sleep and dementia risk. The researchers were specifically attempting to isolate sleep as a factor rather than a downstream marker of other conditions. An additional analysis examined persistent short sleep, meaning participants who reported 6 hours or fewer at not just one but multiple time points across ages 50, 60, and 70. Persistent short sleepers showed a 30% higher dementia risk that was consistent across all 3 measurement points. The finding did not appear to be driven by any single decade. This matters because it suggests a cumulative or long-term relationship between inadequate sleep duration and dementia risk, rather than a single acute episode of poor sleep. The mechanistic connection back to the glymphatic system is worth revisiting here. If slow-wave sleep is the primary driver of amyloid clearance, and slow-wave sleep declines with age, then the relevant question is not just how long someone sleeps but how much slow-wave sleep is occurring within that sleep period. A person sleeping 7 hours with substantial slow-wave content may have better amyloid clearance than a person sleeping 8 hours with fragmented, shallow sleep. This is the distinction the video title is pointing to. Duration is what population studies can measure with questionnaires. Quality and architecture are harder to measure at scale, which is why the literature has focused on duration. But the underlying biology likely depends more on architecture. Now for the limitations of the Sabia study. The first is reverse causation. Early-stage dementia may cause sleep disruption years before clinical diagnosis. Someone sleeping poorly at age 50 may already have early amyloid accumulation that is disrupting their sleep, not the other way around. The researchers attempted to address this by excluding participants who developed dementia in the first 5 years of follow-up, but this cannot fully eliminate the reverse causation concern in observational data. The second limitation is measurement method. Sleep duration in this study was self-reported. Self-reported sleep duration correlates imperfectly with objectively measured sleep duration from actigraphy or polysomnography. People tend to report slightly longer sleep than they actually experience. This means some participants categorized as normal duration sleepers may have had objectively shorter sleep, which would likely attenuate the findings rather than exaggerate them. Third, the Whitehall 2 cohort is predominantly white British civil servants, a socioeconomically and demographically specific group. Generalizability to other populations is uncertain. A fourth limitation is that the study measured duration but not quality. The self-reported hours of sleep cannot tell us about sleep architecture, fragmentation, sleep apnea prevalence, or slow-wave sleep content. The finding that short sleep duration is associated with higher dementia risk is consistent with the glymphatic hypothesis, but the data do not directly measure the mechanism. Confirming that improving sleep quality changes dementia risk would require a randomized intervention trial, which is difficult to design and would take decades to complete. 3 evidence-informed takeaways. First, target 7 to 8 hours, and treat sleep duration with the same seriousness as diet or exercise. If you are consistently sleeping 6 hours or fewer, that is a variable your physician should know about. Sleep insufficiency in adults over 55 is often normalized when it should not be. It is associated not only with dementia risk but with cardiovascular events, impaired glucose regulation, and reduced immune function across the literature. What constitutes enough sleep varies somewhat by individual, but 7 hours is a reasonable minimum benchmark supported by multiple lines of evidence. Second, focus on conditions that support deep sleep, not just total time in bed. The evidence base for sleep hygiene in older adults points to 3 modifiable factors. Temperature: core body temperature needs to drop by about 1 degree Celsius to initiate and sustain deep sleep. A bedroom temperature of roughly 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, or 65 to 66 Fahrenheit, facilitates this. Light: blue wavelength light suppresses melatonin secretion. Avoiding screens in the 90 minutes before bed is the most evidence-supported behavioral intervention for sleep onset. Alcohol: while alcohol can accelerate sleep onset, it suppresses slow wave and REM sleep in the second half of the night, fragmenting the architecture that matters most. Third, if you regularly wake during the night, feel unrefreshed in the morning, or have been told you snore heavily, discuss obstructive sleep apnea screening with your physician. OSA prevalence increases significantly after age 50 and is substantially underdiagnosed in this age group. OSA disrupts both slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, fragments sleep architecture, and is associated with increased dementia risk and cardiovascular events independently. Effective treatment exists. An undiagnosed sleep disorder is the most reversible contributor to poor sleep quality in this age group. To summarize, a 25-year study of nearly 8,000 adults found persistent short sleep of 6 hours or less was associated with a 30% higher dementia risk, independent of cardiovascular, behavioral, and mental health confounders. The mechanistic evidence suggests slow-wave sleep decline with age, and its effect on lymphatic amyloid clearance is a central pathway. The 3 most actionable steps: target 7 to 8 hours of sleep, optimize your sleep environment for deep sleep specifically, and rule out obstructive sleep apnea if you have symptoms. This is educational content, not medical advice. Always consult your physician before changing medications or starting any sleep intervention. Studies are preliminary, individual responses vary. Free biomarker guide in the description. New evidence reviews every Tuesday and Friday.